Welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper. Hey, welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast. This is the last episode of 2022. Can you believe it? That's like, it's been a wild year. I've had so many amazing guests. But I want to jump straight into this one because we're going to have a fun, chilled out one today. But we have one of the most amazing guests, Derek Lambert. He's a personal friend of mine and a dear friend of the show. But most importantly, Derek is the creator and host of Myth Vision Podcast, which is the go-to resource for the academic exploration of religion, mythology, and history, as well as a bunch of other things. Derek has produced thousands of videos on some of the most rarest or the rarest interviews with leading experts in the field of biblical studies, New Testament studies, textual criticism, history, religion, and many more subjects. A few notable guests have been Dr. Paula Fredrickson. Oh my gosh, it's 4 a.m. Sorry. A historian and scholar of early Christianity, Dr. Joshua Bowen, an Assyriologist with expertise in the Old Testament, Dr. Bart Ehrman, a New Testament scholar and textual critic, Dr. Elaine Pagel, historian of religion, Dr. Richard Carrier, a historian and philosopher, Dr. John J. Collins, Old Testament criticism and interpretation, Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, Hebrew Bible scholar and professor of ancient religion, and Dr. Peter von Sivers, history professor currently focusing on Islamic origins. So that was just a handful of the hundreds of experts Derek has interviewed on his show. Often, these experts have very different perspectives on very important questions. Today, we'll be picking Derek's brain in the first possible annual Derek Knows Everything Christmas special. So feel free to ask questions throughout. Welcome, Derek Lambert.
What's up? Dude, can I go ahead and disclaimer? I don't know everything. I just think it's so important that you made that thumbnail and I did not tell you to say that.
I was like, do you really think we should do this? And you're like, yeah, dude, I know everything. And I was like, okay, like.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went down, of course. Yeah, thank you for the invite. We have a friend joining us today, of course.
Yes.
I woke up this morning and I was like, what in the, he just shows up on my chest. You know, he discovers new places all the time and he shows up on my chest.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Him joining us. Yeah.
That's so good. How you been, man? How's things been?
Man, I am working. I'm always working with Myth Vision. And it's snowing here in Washington State. We don't have the greatest tires on our vehicle. So my wife actually the other day was trying to get in our driveway and like the car has a mind of its own because of the snow and ice. And so she's sliding down the hill of the driveway, then down the hill in the road. And being someone from the South and just knowing how to drive through mud and crazy stuff, I was like, watch this, baby. She was crying, actually. But I was like, watch this. I'm going sideways, pulling my car up the road and doing crazy stuff. Just trying to show off, just trying to show off. But yeah, everything's going good. I did want to, can I share a snippet of something that I should have shown? There it is. I don't know if you can share the screen or not. Oh, yeah, whichever one, honey. So she's like, you're not in the Christmas spirit like you need to be, honey. So we got to put on something. Well, honey? Hopefully my noggin will fit. That one doesn't. My head's too big. I got a huge. That's better. Yep, that's better. We'll go with the reindeer, the red nose. So there's Rudolph. Yeah. So good. Thank you, honey. All right. I know you can't see this. That's why I want to lie to all of you and just pretend like I'm doing something here. No, legitimately, I don't think you can see that. But this is a list, right? And when I go to email academics, it's like a job. I look at it like you're getting hired because they have something I want. Yeah. They have an insight. They have a knowledge, a skill set that I want. And I know that thousands of people, they may not even know that they want it. But next thing you know, they hear it and they're going, wow, I didn't know it was that good. So I'm going out here looking, as Dennis McDonald, one of the academics I interview, says, you're like what do you call me, a fox. He said, we scholars are groundhogs. We dig deep down in the ground looking for things, treasures in the earth. But the fox runs around and finds out what the groundhogs have. But he goes all over hunting various groundhogs to discover what riches they pulled up out of the earth. And he said, you could dig and go down and find them yourself. And you do that from time to time. But mainly what you do so well is you discover all the other groundhogs' works and you try to get the groundhogs to communicate. So I'm going to briefly, as fast as I can, blast through. I've got Islamic study highlighted here, which is Dr. Shadi Nasser, Sean Anthony, Mariam Van Putten, Haitham Sidki, Robert Hoyland, Stephen Shoemaker, Peter Van Sievers, as you mentioned, Tommaso Tessi, James Howard Johnston, Reuven Firestone, and Javad Hashmi. I have archaeologist Aaron Mayer, Scott Stripling. Hebrew Bible and New Testament, I think I listed all. I like hoping I didn't miss any. Bart Ehrman, John Collins. I'm just going to do without doing the doctors. Bart Ehrman, John Collins, Paula Fredrickson, Celine Lilly, Candida Moss, Cantel Berthelot, Francesca Stavrakopoulou, Mark Goodacre, Lester L. Graby, Amy Jo Levine. I did Cantel Berthelot twice, didn't I? Yep, I did. So I'm going to erase that. Robin Faith Walsh, Joshua Bowen, Jason Staples, James F. McGrath, Ronald Hindle, Harold Attridge, Trolls Ingberg Peterson, Tim Whitmarsh, M. David Litwa, Dennis R. McDonald, Michael Koshinosh, Professor Audio Fear, Ishai Rosensvee, Samuel Zenner, Robert Price, Richard Carrier, Michael Heiser, John Knight Lundwall, Jennifer Bird, Steve Mason, Elaine Pagels, Zviben Dorbenit, Kip Davis, Delcy Allison Jr., James Tabor, Joel Baden, Joseph A.P. Wilson, Ian Mills, Christopher Stanley, Meredith Warren, John Dominic Crossan, Matthew Munger, Andrew Tabalowski, Daniel McClellan, Jonathan Adler, which I recently interviewed on archaeology, philosophy, Graham Oppie, Peter Singer, scientific studies.
Peter Singer. Have you had Peter Singer on?
Yeah, we did a thing on morality and whether it's objective. He's changed his mind over the years. And then he also is the animal guy who's big on equal for animals.
He wrote Animal Liberation, a fantastic good book.
Yeah. And then last, of course, Lawrence Krauss, Michael Shermer, Andy Thompson, and John Wathy, which these are just like I took one and it was like, hey, let's promote this thing. Let's put Rudolph on the front here. But that's just like the tip of the iceberg because many of these academics I've interviewed multiple times, so that we can learn what they have to offer. And that is my flex. That is my, look at what I've done. But it's really also like, take us seriously. And this is why I said it. And many of the scholars write back, oh my gosh, look at what you've done. How can I be part of that? Yeah. So they want to join and do interviews and stuff.
It's really incredible. And I see that you've even talked some guests on. Like you've had, Dr. Paula Fredrickson. I had no idea who she was. I mean, I'm not huge on the biblical scholar. Like I'm not there like looking up the Bible scholars every weekend. I read Bart Ehrman and stuff like that. But I saw that and I was like, you went to her house and you filmed some actual interviews? Is that right? Or like you flew over to her?
Yeah. So with Paula, she's never interviewed with anybody like what I did. She's been on the news where she's had ABC, NBC, whatever, come to interview her, especially back when she had When Christians Were Jews, I believe, or when one of her books that was an earlier publication really went viral.
I thought you meant like Old Testament, like When Christians Were Jews.
No. Yeah, no, that's the interesting thing, right? Because we think of Christianity like everybody's welcome. It's a Christian, everybody, Jesus died for everybody kind of thing. But when Christians were Jews, when you get really down into the detail, the scholars are saying the earliest fossil of Christianity that we kind of think was a Jewish sect. And in order to be a follower of Christ, you had to become a Jew. So Paul's opponents are saying Paul's wrong. And some people argue that his opponents were the apostles or possibly connected to the 12 in Jerusalem. And they were saying, no, they need to circumcise and they need to follow the Torah in order to be a Christ follower.
I think without Paul, I've heard this before, and this is why it's called, just before when I said that it was Derek who came up with the name, that was obviously a joke. I come up with the name, but this is why I said the Derek Knows Everything podcast, because I feel like I've heard random things throughout the year, and I feel like I can just like fact check them with you, and you can tell me what the experts say. So it's like you're like my Jesus to the God, like the scholars are like
I'm your mediator.
yeah, you're my mediator. Yeah. I've heard that if it wasn't for Paul, Christianity would probably still just remain a sect of Judaism, like the Pharisees or the Sadducees. Is that right? Is it possible?
It's hard to say if Christianity would have not gone extinct completely, because the earliest sect went extinct.
Well, so did the Pharisees and Sadducees and stuff, right? Like they don't exist anymore,
there's still continuity to the rabbinic tradition. So while one might argue that these particular schools and groups stopped existing, this is why people would say, well, Christianity, of course, didn't cease to exist, because it evolves like all things. Oh, yeah.
Cut your dick and follow me. And I was like, that's very funny.
Galatians says in Galatians 5, I can't remember what verse, this is what Paul says. He's like, if you're going to circumcise, because the opponents of Paul are trying to convince everybody, if you want to be a Christ follower, you must do this. And he says, if you go to cut the tip of your dick, he's like, Paul says, cut the whole dick off. He literally just says, because
does he? That's not in is that in the New Testament? I must have read past that part.
Do we need to open this up and show you that our Bible teaches you this? Holy crap, Paul!
I should have got this. So wait, before we jump into looking up verses on cutting our dicks off, I do want to say that we are drinking delicious coffees this morning.
I got coffee in here. Yep.
Yeah. So last time you were on, Derek, we went through your journey, which had to do with you're sober, but people can go watch that if they want to. And you know what? Something has come across. Like I think Deep Drinks has caused me to drink more than I'm comfortable with. So starting next year, we're going to be doing Dry January. So the first 2 guests next year, Dry January. And I guess I may as well, now I'm talking about it, I might as well just quickly plug the channel as well. So for those who don't know, Deep Drinks podcast, we have conversations with the guest, and we drink drinks that the guest chooses, and that sets the tone of the conversation. Sometimes Shannon Q comes on and she makes us drink lots and lots of rum, and that ends up being funny. And sometimes it's a deep conversation over coffee, which is just as good. But coming up in January, we have 2 awesome guests. We have Caitlin, who is a expert in Shintoism. So I'm going to be learning about Shinto, or not Shintoism. Sorry, that's the wrong. She's already corrected me, and I haven't even had her on. It's just called Shinto. So we're going to be talking about Shinto and anime, which is going to be awesome. And then we'll also have Becoming Deconverted with Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist, which will be really awesome to finally interview someone who was such an important part of my deconstruction experience. So
he's a great guy too. Yeah, met him in Texas.
Oh yeah, cool.
Oh yeah, great guy. Very soft spoken, just really fun.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
He's so
I'm playing along with you here. I'm purposely egging you in this, okay? Because you've called me the guy who knows everything, and that's not true. But go ahead.
No. So sorry. For me, everyone, it's 4 a.m. for me. And I for some reason got to sleep like 2 hours before I was had to get up. So like I'm a little bit loopy. So you have to forgive me if I'm not like following everything so well. I'll watch this in the future and I'll be like, wow, Derek was amazing. So
yeah, where was I?
Let's go into the Bible and let's pull out the scripture, man. All
right, man. Turn to Galatians 5:12, brethren.
All right. Alrighty. This is the same Bible I used through ministry college, by the way. Still got it going strong. Although I've forgotten where Galatians is, apparently. It's before. Oh, yeah. Got it. Galatians, what? Sorry?
5 verse 12. And read that. 12. Yeah.
Okay.
You got to get the context around it, but go ahead. It's feel free to.
All right. I'll go from verse 11. Brothers, I am still preaching circumcision while I'm still being persecuted. In that case, the offense of the cross has been abolished. As for those agitators, I wish that they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves.
Cut your whole dick off. Yeah. Paul says it. He's pissed off because his opponents are telling his believers, you aren't in Christ. You don't believe the
Yeah.
true gospel if you don't go and cut your dick head off. Now, meaning
Wow.
circumcised. So, and then I've asked a deeper question over the years, because Galatia, the location where this letter is being written to the Galatians, in Galatia, there was a god named Attis. And anyone who knows the myth of Attis, there's also a mystery religion here, mystery cult. And the cult of Attis surrounded about the god Attis, who literally cuts off, in the story, the dick and balls, the whole nine, and bleeds out to death, right? In this narrative. And many of its, I guess you'd call them priests, shaman type priests that follow within the tradition, would do this. They'd go into a frenzy and they'd emasculate themselves. And I asked myself, okay, look, if this is the region this God lives in, and he's speaking to Gentiles that are converting, Gentiles would have known about Attis. Is this kind of a double-edged sword comment? Is Paul saying,
no pun
like,
intended.
screw these guys, these Judaizers who are trying to make you circumcised and cut your penis off?
Yeah.
You might as well go all the way and be like Attis. I wondered if this was a
and then
joke.
you'll bleed. It's like almost like you'll bleed out as well, like you'll die as well, like your death.
You might as well, yeah. He's saying, because if you go that far to circumcise, he pretty much points out you're literally making the crucifixion of Christ null and void. Like it doesn't even count, because you're over here thinking the law is what's going to do this, and it's not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually, this is why I love having you on, and it's fascinating. Someone said, how many of you guys are squirming right now? We're starting off strong here, talking about cutting off dicks. 17 minutes into the Deep Drinks podcast, sober as
just
anything,
scratching the surface.
And this is what I love about you, because you have like this stuff that, like, I listen to you talk on the show and on Myth Vision podcast, and I'm like, you must have so many little hooks in your brain. When someone says something, you're like, it's like a domino effect. You like, it's like you just have such a broad, like I said, like I made it up at the start that said you talk to more people on the with these expertise than anyone on earth. But that was, I think, a pretty. Would you say that's an accurate assumption? I don't know anyone else that would talk to so many. It's such a
I think
variety.
there's more people out there that talk to more scholars than me. But I mean, no, there are, but it's probably not in this niche the way that I'm doing it. No,
yeah, in your niche, you have to be the only, well, at least producing content on it, because like it's just like, I'm sure there's like a board or something that oversees like scholars or something that, you know, they probably talk to more, but you're like producing, you have so many, and there's such wild, you talk to like Richard Carrier, he's a mythicist. He believes that Jesus never existed in a physical way, right? That the Jesus story, and he's a historian, right? And then you talk to people who have written books like against mythicism, like Bart Ehrman, who's not a Christian, but he's like, no, Jesus was a real historical figure. Like, so I'm wondering, like, how much we need to go into detail on all these things. I see we've got a lot of people in the audience today, and a lot of them are obviously.
Do we want to let the audience kind of sway us? Yeah, because I like to. Look, we can go wherever you want, right? Yeah. I'm not cutting my dick off. I'm just telling you right now, man. I'm not going to do it. I know you were talking to me before the show about making that happen on camera.
Yeah. We're trying to plan out something, but that's we're going to start an OnlyFans if that ever, like, if we get a certain funding.
Exactly.
Here's the question: you could ask Peter Singer. You know how he has that book, A Life You Can Save.
Do what?
You know, have you heard about his book, A Life You Can Save? So it's the concept of, like, you walk past like someone drowning, and like, but like to save them, like this child drowning, you would have to risk your life, right? Is it like morally? Are you morally obligated to do so? And it's like, well, no, you're not. Like, it's probably morally virtuous, but you're not obliged. What if it's something you're only going to ruin your like $50 pair of shoes? And it's like, well, then you're probably morally obliged to save this child. And then it's like, well, you can save a child if you give $50 to charity, blah blah blah. Like that. That's the whole idea. So and he's a utilitarian, I'm pretty sure, when it comes to his ethics. So the question would be that he asked Peter Singer is, how much money would we need to get on OnlyFans that it would be morally obliged to cut our dicks off in order to get that money to put towards charity?
I have no clue.
Derek has left the show.
Have a nice day.
Close the window. No, okay. Let's get into some juicy content. But first, the most important question, and I shouldn't do this because this is taking us off track again. But who are you voting? Are you voting for Ye? Are you voting for Kanye in 2024? That's the most important question.
How the hell did you know, man? I mean,
isn't that crazy? It's crazy, right? Like, what world do we live in where Kanye West is asking Donald Trump to be his vice president?
That whole thing recently, I'm just like, if it's not one thing with the Liver King, right, coming out as a steroid juicing guy when we already knew that he was a steroid
I was so
juicing
surprised.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so shocking. This guy looks like a modern day Hercules, but he's not on steroids. Oh, he's on steroids. What? To what Kanye went off the deep end. And this is sad because I work in mental health with helping, not like professionally, but with the addiction side of my life. I don't even need to get a doctor to recognize there's some stuff going on. People are giving this guy a platform instead of trying to get him help like that he really needs. And I understand that you can't make people do stuff, but I really think that they're just kind of taking advantage of this because they know that he's going to get views and stuff. So it's a sad state of affairs because who knows what he's saying if in a month or two, if he is medicated, where he's like, damn, I shouldn't have said all that. Like, I don't know why I did that,
Yeah, but then not only that is it's like if he does get like locked up, quote unquote, like institutionalized to get his mental, like that plays into all the conspiracies he's been talking about. So it's like a really, really dangerous. Like it's a really, it's not good. It's none of it's good, but it's
a similar QAnon type. It's like in that same vein. It really is.
Yeah. So. The race realism kind of like. Yeah, dodgy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to actually swing it right back, bring us back onto actual track, and I've got some quick questions for you. Okay, so let's do rapid fire, and then we'll see where we want to go with these.
All right. Do I need a yes or no, or do I give a quick?
Give us. Let's just go. If you feel like it needs an explanation, let's go into it. But if not, we can circle back around.
Okay.
So your quick position: did Jesus exist historically?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to
Jesus...
like? I'm not.
Well, yeah. Go into it.
This is my conclusion right now.
Yeah.
And I think yes, there was a guy. I totally get why people would say no or think no. I've read on the historicity. I've read Robert Price. I've read Richard Carrier. And I've read the other side. And to me, it was very mundane, simple things that made me think, okay, we have like a bare bones, basic, mundane guy. And people go, well, why would someone do that with some mundane figure here? You could almost say, as there are gospels that are being written about this guy that are written by people who've never met Jesus, who don't really know Jesus. They might have heard stories that are passed along about him. And they're writing fictional narratives that may have maybe have kernel in history, but really it's when you get to Paul. And Paul talks about him being crucified and born of a woman, born of the flesh, born under the law. Born of a woman is a Hebrew idiom or Jewish idiom. And this was something they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls about real people who were like of women born, right? Even the Gospels mention of women born, John the Baptist, no man is greater than John the Baptist, which Jesus said this. So it's like, is Jesus saying John the Baptist is better than him? These are other questions that go down the road. But anyway, point is it was mundane things like, okay, like Romans really crucified so many Jews. And it was a common thing that they crucified Jews. Josephus, Jewish writer, Philo, Jewish writer, Paul, Jewish writer, all in the same century, right? In almost contemporary Philo and Paul mention crucifixion of a Jewish guy. And I don't see any clear text in Paul that gives it. Now, this is where mythicists will disagree with me and they go, well, I'm sorry, I don't draw that conclusion. I beg to differ. I think it's more common the thing like to say this stuff happens on Earth. You need, for me, you need the evidence to explicitly say it happens somewhere else, like outer space. I'm just like, someone's crucified. That happens a lot to humans.
So
right?
just to explain a little bit, because I got into a big argument with Godless Engineer. We're friends now. Like I love John, huge friends. But at the time, I posted something like on Twitter about like it's clear to me that mythicists are just mythicists for the feels. And I thought, and then we got into like, and he came onto his show and we had an argument, and it was great. I got put in my place. But my understanding of mythicism was essentially like Jesus didn't exist, lol. Like I thought that's what mythicism was.
No,
where it turns out it's like I didn't realize that there was this whole different cosmology around it, where it's like no, it's like what the Bible is describing. So for people who don't know, who maybe aren't in this sphere, and they're just like, what are you talking about? So the stories of Jesus were recorded in the Gospels and in the New Testament, and there are people called mythicists who believe that essentially those stories are like almost parodies of what's happening in the spirit realm. Is that right? Is it like a good way to describe it, or like how would you describe it? It's like something's happening.
So I'll just tell you what mythicists
are.
The versions we're finding mostly in Richard Carrier's propositions, but also I think there's overlap with him and Robert Price on this. Mythicists are positing that the earliest Christian cult believed that Jesus was a pre-existent figure. It's not just mythicists that think this. I mean, it's in Paul's literature. So even a historicist or a mythicist both think that he's a pre-existent figure. We find this also with Alexander the Great. Like some of these figures were pre-existent and they came to Earth, like almost like they were sent to Earth in a way. And then they go back, right? You see this with Romulus. He goes back, Anyway, he's a pre-existent heavenly figure that they believed, according to mythicists. The mythicists don't believe this. The mythicists, some might. There are a few believers that are mythicists. That's a different can of worms I'm not going into, because they actually believe in this stuff. But that's like not the category we're discussing. They believe, the mythicists say that Paul and the earliest Christians believed Jesus was a celestial figure, pre-existent angel in heaven. He was a celestial figure in heaven. He comes down, is made or manufactured flesh of a woman, or really the idea is that he is immortal. He is now a person, a real person in the mind of Paul and other people in heaven. He is attacked and crucified by demons in heaven below the moon. He is crucified below the moon in heaven. He is buried in heaven below the moon. He resurrects from the dead in heaven, up there in heaven, right? And then ascends back up through the 7 layers, if you will, or through all the layers of heaven to the highest immortality form where God dwells and such, and ascends back up. And they believe that he never actually came to Earth, like here on Earth. Whereas I just go the step further of saying like, no, I think the guy was here on Earth. And he actually got crucified by real people that are Romans. And if Paul's talking about the archons here, which he believes that these are actual demons and spirits and gods or daemons, whatever you want to say, I say these are humans controlled by these daemons. It's not like Paul blames the humans only. He says we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers and rulers, etc. So Paul, and what convinced me was Elaine Pagels on the Origins of Satan book. She points out that in early Christian literature,
I've got that back there, yeah.
Christians called each other children of Satan. Now, does that mean that they were literally descended, spawn, seed, literally of Satan? Or that they were...
what? Christians called themselves...
Christians called other Christians, like today. You're not a true Christian. You don't have the right gospel.
Oh, okay.
They're part of the Satan's camp, right? Like,
okay.
Even the book of Revelation implies when he's writing to the 7 churches in Asia, some of these churches he's condemning or rebuking, and they're kind of practicing satanic things, or like the prophet of Balaam, whatever. The point is I'm not taking this. It's all demonic and it's all spiritual. I think Paul has the world around him is ruled by invisible. He doesn't think non-materialistic things, like we think invisible means doesn't exist. They think they have material in some way, but that these demons are controlling humans. Satan can enter people. I mean, like you see Judas, right? Satan enters Judas. Judas ends up going and betraying Christ. The point is, Paul, I'm convinced, is writing in a sense kind of in code. He can't go, those damn Romans, here's a letter to the Romans. Those damn Romans, he's going to get killed, or this is not going to continue. So he's not going to explicitly say, hey, these are the people. This is my perception. So I'm convinced that he actually comes to earth, whereas mythicists say this all happens only in heaven. And this gets into the question of dualism. Is on earth, things happening on earth also being like they claim that they're happening in heaven? Is there some sense that, there's like a mirror image of what's happening here on earth happening in heaven? I'd say that model would still work with historicity. So,
well, that's the thing. I actually reached out to John, Godless Engineer. I asked him, I was like, what is what's the, like, some good evidence? And he well, not good evidence, but like, so why do you think this? Because he's a strong mythicist, obviously.
Right.
He said, personally, I think that Jesus is the result of a first-century Jews creating a Hellenistic mystery cult using pre-existing ideas in Judaism. Christianity has all the classic marketers of a mystery cult. So a few things he said, like Jesus' figure is highly mythologized with little historical evidence. Paul is our only independent source, so they reject the Gospels as historical. Some people cite Q, apparently, which we might have to explain that, but it's hypothetical, and major ideas around Jesus' existence in Judaism, which clouds the historical account. So he's saying that, like, because in the Gospels, there's these things that are clearly written in from the Old Testament to make it fit. So, for example, the classic that Bart Ehrman talks about a lot is, how many times did the chicken crow or the rooster crow? And it's like 3, there's a book that said it crowed 6 times, because in one gospel it says it crowed 3 times on one day, and then another gospel says it crowed 3 times on another day. Right. And the reason is because one was trying to fit it in with the Old Testament scriptures. And so it's like, well, the question is when did the chicken crow, right? Not super relevant, but it is actually relevant, right? So, what do you think about some of those points? Especially, like, can you maybe talk about Q? What is Q?
It's a hypothetical source material for where they think that some of the Gospels get their ideas from. But Q or no Q, and really it's what also Q, I mean, depending on who you're asking this, because the Q might be different. Like Dennis McDonald might even grant that Mark might know Q. Some scholars try to posit Q into the picture because there's common material between Matthew and Luke that isn't in Mark. And where did they get this material? And by the way, I think I am not able to say certainly, or I'm not going to hinge any proposition I make off of Q. But when I look into it, look at it like this. If the modus operandi of Luke and Matthew is to copy Mark, they're copying Mark, right? And you notice there's common material between Matthew and Luke that isn't Mark. And there's identical material there, or at least it seems like they're overlapping. If the modus operandi of Luke and Matthew is to copy a book called Mark, or we're just calling it that for the sake of convenience, then why wouldn't the modus operandi also be to copy any other source that might be where they're getting this other information from? So it's like, if they're already doing a practice of something, I don't see any reason why they're not also doing it to some other source. We just don't have. But even then, here's the thing. Let's scratch that, because the synoptics are all relying on Mark. And Mark seems to be aware of Paul. The real question we should have is, and it should be an open thing and tentative. We shouldn't be dogmatic. And I also don't think we should be closed off to this idea and acting like Paul is the only source of anything we have of early Christianity that is reliable in any way, shape, or form to give us the notion that people know of a Jesus tradition. Because I would say, even though the Gospels are extremely highly historical fiction, I would say that, even Mark's getting stuff somewhere other than just Paul. I wouldn't imagine that, well, everything's just Paul and we have to rely only on Paul as if that's the only place. I can't prove, there's no evidence here. If you're trying to be a scientist in a lab, I have no chemicals I can pour into a test tube and say, hey, here you go. No, that doesn't work. I would say in Paul alone, combining it with what we learn from these other sources and stuff, to me, it makes perfect sense that this guy gets mythologized. And yes, I do think also the mystery religion stuff is, Paul talks in mystery language. So I'm a historicist who thinks everything he's pretty much saying here, I can get in on. And even with the Gospels inventing him in a way, they're creating him. They're making him more than what he is, if that makes sense. And if you go and read I've been bringing this up a lot lately, but if you go read Suetonius, Lives of the Caesars, and you read the story of Augustus from his portents of his birth to what he did, they're taking stuff from Alexander the Great. They're taking stuff from Julius Caesar. There's earlier stuff that they're kind of tacking into the narrative about Augustus. And you go, well, this Augustus figure has far more data, and we know he existed. There's good reason, high confidence to say Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Yeah, this guy existed. We have a lot of reasons, a lot of evidence that we don't have for Christianity. But looking at it literarily, I'm not convinced just by reading literarily that we should draw the conclusion Jesus is a completely fictional figure in the minds that they think are real of Paul and the early Christians in outer space. To me, I'd be a mythicist, to put it point blank, David, if it was clearly written in Paul that Jesus was crucified under the moon in heaven, not on earth. See, mythicists needed to say on earth in order to be convinced that this is somehow here, and that would make them more like, oh, historical figure. They'd be more convinced if it happened, and Paul says, this happened on earth, like here. For me, I don't need that, because everything in human existence typically happens here on earth. If the evidence said it happened in heaven, I'd be convinced of mythicism.
You haven't heard of the celestial Julius Caesar, or I'm just kidding.
No,
sorry.
Yeah, no, but I definitely know that they go to heaven. They get taken, and so they end up ascending. And what's funny to me is, like, while the Gospels are highly fictional, they literally right out the bat put Jesus on earth. So there has to be a conspiracy involved between Paul and the Gospel of Mark, which is using Paul, according to mythicists. And they believe this text portrays him on earth being crucified. So if he's using Paul and this Mark guy, and he's like, hey, all right, we're going to have him crucified on earth. Haven't you read Paul, dude? He says he's in heaven, I thought, mythicists say. Why is Mark not placing him in heaven being crucified? Instead, he's being crucified by Romans, which was the modus operandi of the first century. Romans crucified Jews. So it's like, it's almost... For me, I know it's not this super complex, oh my God, you're blowing my mind. It's really Occam's razor and less ad hoc to me to just go, we're Jews. The simple question, back up from the New Testament, back up from mythicism, back up from historicism. How common was it that Jews were crucified on earth? First century. And then ask the question, how common was it that Jews were crucified in outer space? This is a simple question that led me down a path that made me go, oh, snap. How do I reconcile the archons that Paul talks about? And I looked at Elaine Pagels. You have mythicists who say they're full-on demons and never mortals, never human, like as if humans aren't even involved. It's these celestial demons in outer space. And then you have the other side, the historicists, who kind of want to go the opposite direction and say, these archons, these rulers are all human and only human. Because archon in Greek, the term for the ruler is simply a term that is well known in the Greco-Roman world to mean a human ruler, someone who's in charge, a political figure, someone who's in control. And I said, hold on, maybe both of them are right, and it's not either or. The demons, Paul believes in this supernatural, we call it today, world, where this world, the air, is full of gods and, all the stuff.
Yeah.
So the humans that are obviously kind of doing the things they're doing are really controlled by the evil powers that be, if that makes sense. That's what I take.
That's very interesting. I'm to be honest, I haven't, like, I've read half of Rich Carrier's book. I've talked to John. I've tried to wrap my head around both sides of it. I
learned from all of them, just so you know.
Yeah.
I don't think we should shut our minds off.
No, of course not. And that's something that I learned because like I said, I thought it was just mythicists, like Jesus doesn't exist, lol, or like Sky Daddy. I thought it was like a cringy atheist thing like that.
Yeah.
So I see everyone's questions, everyone. We will get to them, hopefully. But I do want to read out James's question because it's kind of related. Which experts should James ask about when? Let me just pop it up. When the Jews or Christians changed from thinking that the sky was a solid dome holding back the vast ocean to thinking outer space was the thing. So when did flat Earth and the cosmology of the Bible kind of change? Do you know?
I don't know, and I don't know what scholar to ask that. I do know that I have done some episodes with this weirdo in the chat named Digital Hammurabi. It's just such a strange guy. Don't tell him I told you.
He's very strange.
I mean, he has this book that I can't stop reading because he's such a weirdo. And it's only on my desk, literally right here next to my computer. He's so weird. I have to read it.
He is weird. He's gonna roast us in the just watch him. He'll come in. He always does this. Just watch. But I've got both his books: Handbook to the Old Testament, Handbook to the New Testament, Old Testament, Volume 1 and 2, and Does Slavery Endorse the Old Testament? Fascinating man.
Fascinating weirdo. Call it what it is, you know?
Yeah, because like I read it because to me it's like comedy. It's like I'm laughing at it because like his scholarship is just,
dude. Nobody writes so simple and clear. In fact, I always underestimate Dr. Josh. Sometimes I'll be like, all right, I'm off to another scholar because I'm doing so much of that, and then I read his work or I'll listen on Audible again, and I'm like, bro, what the hell? What? This is so good. But he's so weird. Remember that. Don't ever forget that.
Yeah, I love Josh and Megan. They're both amazing. But what
they are,
something that I don't know if maybe you can tell me, Dr. Josh, if you probably don't. So I don't think Josh appreciated these jokes, but for a while I was going onto all of Josh's posts on Twitter, when he'd say like some complicated argument, and then I'm like, hey, just talk to my Christian friend. They said you're wrong, so I'm sorry, bud. Or like, you got to go get your, my Jehovah's Witness friend said that actually Jesus was crucified on the stake. I'm sorry to inform you. And he wasn't liking the post, so I'm guessing my jokes weren't landing. But I thought they were funny. I laughed to myself, and I'll tell my wife, and she'd look at me like, "That's not funny." But it's like, sorry, but he's got like a list of degrees, and I call him. I think I call him something really stupid, like Daddy Assyriology or something, like just like he's the expert in that field, and he didn't like it.
He talks about this cosmology question though, in terms of he obviously knows that the Hebrew Bible teaches this. He understands there might be some reason to think, and I don't know this because we talked about this briefly when we were jabbing back at who was the guy that Mike. I can't think of his name. You know, the Christian pastor Mike guy that was out there. No. I actually like Lacona, even though I think, you know, he draws his conclusions.
He's one of the only Christian people who emailed me back when I
I like him. I actually like Mike. I think
Same.
he's trying, and I really do. I got to give him some effort for trying within that bubble that he's in. Mike's Winger. Yep, Winger. Someone brought up Nimbus. You deserve 100 points in heaven. So we talked about that, and we wondered if like the New Testament still carries over this cosmology. I know that in rabbinic tradition, they kind of talk about some of this. I've heard in passing, but as far as an expert that says clear transition, like they start to think outer space there's no solid dome. I don't know when, and I don't know if there's a fine line, because maybe certain traditions or certain rabbis are, you know, thinking this, while other ones might be more into the philosophy of the Greeks and seeing that it's not solid. I don't know. Hard for me to know.
Someone said, James said, relating to my prior question, same person actually, two great questions, James. When did the heavens go from meaning the sky to a golden city?
Related to the prior question, when did heavens go from meaning the sky to a golden city? I don't know that question. Like, I don't know the answer.
Well, you do. You know everything. You just got to make it up.
I got to make it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you want me to make it up, what happened in 342 AD during a guy named Hakashakamakaha, he said that...
sound like you're speaking in tongues with them.
It was. Don't.
By the way...
You got to translate that if you have the gift.
By the way, last week I had Emily Farrell-Pars's wife on, right? And she's not really big in the atheist space. Like she didn't know who Matt Dillahunty was, just to put it, but she went through her own deconstruction experience and things like that. She was talking about that. She didn't know a lot about me, and we were talking about tongues. And she said, should have bought a Honda, something like should have bought a Honda. Would have, like, she made up some like phrase.
Yeah.
And I thought she was actually trying to speak in tongues. So I start speaking in tongues as like, oh yeah, I can speak like in tongues as well. And she's like, her mind is like blown, and she's like, wait, so. And then she's like, so what do you think is happening there? And then I start going on, and her face, like you can watch it in the interview, she's like, what fucking podcast am I on? Because she thought I was like defending she's like, wait, and she's like, so you don't believe in
Oh.
God, but you still find tongues works for you? And I was like, no, I don't think it's real. Like, what? No, I was just what? Like,
You know what I mean? Like that's
and it was so amazing, just to watch her like brain like melt a little bit. But she's amazing. It was a great episode. We talked about purity culture, but
I don't know that answer. And look, if I don't
Okay.
know, I'm going to tell you flat out.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I've been learning as well too. Like, don't pretend. Just say, I don't know. Nobody gets hurt by it. In fact, you hurt yourself if you're just like, I'm not sure. And that goes back to the question: did Jesus exist? I'm not sure, but I am more convinced there was a guy. Based on the way I'm approaching this, I can't prove, but nobody can. You know. So.
Wow. So that was a very long, quick position, and I loved it. So
I had to give you that because
you got to give me. No, that's it sets a good foundation. So here's the next slither of the historicity. So for those who don't know, you used to be a pretty strong Christian, right? And now you're not a Christian. So and if people want to learn more, well, unless you've changed your mind, but if people want to learn more about your journey, the other podcast is amazing. It's still one of my favorite. But the next question: was Jesus crucified?
Yeah. I don't know why that question would be asked, honestly. The only reason I would say is it's coupled into the previous question of did Jesus exist?
Yeah, it's like if he did exist, because some people will say that Jesus did exist, but he looked nothing like the Jesus we have. He might have been like a teacher or a philosopher, and then we made up these stories about him being crucified.
But this is the thing, even mythicists, I mean, if you get down to their position, they would say, no, it's a figment of the imagination of the early Christians that he wasn't really crucified. They believed he was crucified. But if you grant the mythicist proposition, they believe that Paul believed that Jesus really was crucified. So the earliest Christians believed that Jesus was literally crucified. They just say it was up there rather than on earth.
Yeah.
And so I would say it happened on earth. And I don't see any reason to think that a Jew wasn't crucified when we have tremendous amount of evidence to suggest as far as literature goes. And then we even have ankle bones with literally like Jewish ossuaries where they're bone boxes. And there's a special period in time where Jews buried themselves like that, awaiting the resurrection. Very apocalyptic time in history. They thought the resurrection in the end was going to happen soon. Like we found bones with real nails in the ankle bone. They were crucified. I don't see any reason why that doesn't make more sense and have more weight in this argument. Now that I'm not a mythicist, I see that. It's kind of like when you look back and you go, how come that doesn't cause people to go over? This is my opinion, but yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to add a question in between the question just then and the one I was going to ask. Was there an empty tomb?
I think that's legend. I can't say with certainty.
Wait, the empty tomb or the resurrection? Because the next one is, did Jesus rise from the dead? But I'm going back to, was there an empty tomb?
I think the empty tomb narratives that we find in the Gospels are legend. I believe that Paul, when he says that Jesus resurrected, right, from the dead, this is implying he's not dead anymore, some way, shape, or form. Different scholars tackle this differently. So James Tabor doesn't think the flesh matters at all in this. In fact, James Tabor says the body could have been right there in the cave and they would have still believed he rose from the dead. Not literal physical. Other scholars think, no, it's a common trope that if people die and then they just believe that they ascended and went off into heaven. I'll give you a few things too that I think is interesting. In Acts 17, this is not Paul. This is the author, whoever Luke Acts is, writing much later. I say early 2nd century. I'm with Shelley Matthews, Richard Purvo, Steve Mason, many other academics. I think they're right that this is late because Luke Acts knows Josephus, in my opinion. But I'm giving you this to say in Acts 17, Paul is creating this gospel narrative. He's kind of a Socrates. Paul in his real letter says he has a speech impediment. He's not good at speaking. But in Acts 17, they fictionalize Paul, and Paul's like, ladies and gentlemen, Jesus, like they make up this narrative. But in it, there's something that kind of cues you in on something I think is interesting about the author. And he says that these, what was the name of the group? They believed that Zeus was buried, but Zeus's body isn't in there and that he is alive forever. So there's like, I don't know if it's the name of what the name of the group was, the Cretans, liars, Cretans. You find this also in a pastoral epistle later, that Zeus was buried and dead. He analogizes Zeus and his burial, which most of the Greeks would say, no, he's alive forever. He's a high god. He's never going to die. Or can't stay dead. If there's a narrative out there that might have existed that he died, he can't stay dead. So they mythologize and say, that tomb you say he's buried in, he's not buried there. And you wonder why they're doing that when he's talking about Jesus and comparing it to the resurrection. So I think it's a legend, and it's a common trope in the Mediterranean that if a body is missing, that he has become a god. The whole
is that
reason
really?
the whole reason the body isn't there. By the way, my mythicist friends would 100% agree with me on this. Like we all, and it's not like, I don't even know I'm bringing that up because of the previous questions, but my point is like, we all recognize like, this is
we're doing
legend.
damage control, like,
well,
hey
no,
man, like mythicists are also here. Like we're also love you. Like,
yeah, well, look, I do damage control because there's so much tribalism and people take
there is.
It's like, why are we being so like the animosity's tense? Why? It's legend.
No, it's because of people. It's because of people like me who like literally make stupid comments on like who don't know enough about it. But like, thank like Godless Engineer was so good that he brought me on. He set me straight. Like we had it was a bit of a fiery back and forth, but we ended as friends. Like it was good. But I like Godless Engineer because you can have a conversation and stuff. But yeah, it's that. I mean, it's like a typical. It's like the shitting on mythicists. Mythicists are like the vegans of the scholarly space, I guess. You know what I mean? Like everyone likes to like rip on them, and it's like, yeah.
But I mean,
not to rip on vegans either.
It's a back and forth thing where like both sides are just doing this to each other. I think the simply answer is I don't think there was an empty tomb, but this is what I do, right? So what I do is I go, but if there was a body and the body went missing, how and why and where and what, that's what I get into. So
it's exciting, right?
It's for me, I'm lost in the detail. Like I'll read a scholar, serious academic. One of their answers is, and I can't remember the name of the guy. He said, well, the disciples stole the body. And you go, well, hold on. The Gospels literally tell you that, by the way. The accusers, the Jewish people say, your disciples stole the body. This is in the Gospels. They tell you the answer. This one real serious scholar says. They tell you the answer. And he goes to back up this claim, even though I don't follow his conclusions. He backs up the claim by saying, these guys were fishermen in Galilee on the Lake of Tiberias, which then got monopolized by the emperor. Tax collectors are collecting tax for every fish they bring out of that damn lake. They don't want to go back and labor for the rest of their life. They're getting paid by these Christ-following little house churches to feed them and giving them money. They're not going to want to go back to this construction work for the rest of their life kind of thing when they're getting fed and taken care of by just preaching a message. So they would lie by stealing the body. Now, I don't draw it, but to me, I'm giving you an analogy in detail here. If I ended up on your couch tomorrow, I told this on James Apperson's show, which he's on in the chat, and spoke to Jay, a buddy of mine, the other night. If I appeared on your couch in 24 hours and I was dead, you can't ask me questions. I'm using an analogy. The first thing you're probably going to think is Derek got a flight. How did he get here? He flew here. How did he get my address? He probably found it online or something, or talked to one of my friends or something. Yeah. Common sense would lead you to this conclusion. The last thing you would think is I teleported.
Yeah.
That I have a portal in my like in this office that I could get to. The last thing. Christians want you to believe the last thing is the most probable, that he rose from the dead, because people believed it. As if people aren't superstitious or aren't like wishing and hoping this stuff is true. You know? Yeah,
that I'm with you with that. I want to read a little section of the Bible again. Forgive me. But this is what really stood out to me is when I was doing my video on the Bible, like the other New Testament's historical. I was reading. I found out that Mark was the earliest gospel, right? Mark was written, what is it, 35 years after Jesus died, or like 40 years or something?
Let's just say we don't know.
35, 40 years. It's not.
I would just say after the war in 70. At least.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's at least 35 years, right? So this is the earliest gospel, right? So so everyone, I want you to picture yourself like, so this is 30 years after, like, this is the time when, you know, the life expectancy was about 35 years anyway.
Right.
35 years ago, there's these stories, and then someone finally decides to write down an account, and they want to tell the whole story. They leave out the virgin birth, they leave out like that whole part of the story, and this is how they end, right? So Jesus died on the cross, he's been buried in the tomb, and says this: when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might anoint Jesus' body. Very early the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone was, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in white robes sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, he who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See this place where they laid him. But go, tell the disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as I told you. Trembling with bewilderment, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. End. That's the original ending of Mark. It has nothing about the Jesus encounter with the resurrected disciples. It has nothing. That's it. It doesn't have the part where Jesus levitates up into the crowd. That's the original ending of Mark. And you can look in any Bible, it will say, well, most Bibles will say the most reliable early manuscripts and other ancient witnesses do not have Mark 16:9-20. So it's like, wait, like if you're gonna be talking about like the most basic, like some of the most basic stuff, you're not gonna mention that Jesus levitated into the clouds. You're not gonna mention that Jesus like showed himself to 500 people. Now I know some people, I think Inspiring Philosophy says this. He says that there was an original ending, and we've lost that original ending. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No. I'm with Delcy Allison Jr., and he's a Christian, says no. I'm with many scholars recognize that Mark ended in this spot. I know there's a case people can make because, well, it ends so shocking. You don't need to tack on an ending to recognize what it's trying to tell you. He's not here anymore. He's a god. That's the whole point of him not being in the tomb. He's a god now. Romulus gets taken, and they're like, what the hell happened? And it ends up being later, he appears to one of his faithful followers and shows up and is like, hey, it's me. Go and tell the people of Rome, blah, 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 blah. Like he appears to him later. He disappears, and they're like, oh, what happened? And there's rumors that he got killed by the Senate, which is what happened to Julius Caesar. You wonder if that happened after Julius really was killed. I don't know. Or that he's completely gone and that he was taken by the gods because he couldn't be here anymore. The gods had to take him. He's gone. He became a god. This is clearly the fictional narrative of Mark. He became a god. And even though you don't have the story of him ascending, right? You have more of a detailed narrative in Acts where he ascends. That trope is a trope. Romulus ascends in a cloud. Jesus ascends in a cloud. Like, it's just it's fun writing, and people who are taking this stuff so serious, like I did for 15 years, like of my life as a youth, like just we're missing the reality of the bigger world at large, and we were downplaying other figures and not really considering, because I just didn't know them as a Christian. I think if I'd have known what I know now sooner about all these other gods and figures, if I didn't have, this is psychoanalyzing, forgive me in advance. I'm cool with Michael Jones. I really am. We get along.
Yeah.
But like, well, I don't know if he would or could right now, for reasons of supporting his house or what he does through his channel, if he could go the full way of, letting go or something. So I don't know if he's holding on because he sees these comparative figures. It just seems like special pleading and double standards when you have to say, well, Romulus didn't really do that. And this stuff preceded Christianity. Like, you have all these fake tropes that you wouldn't say actually are true, and you wouldn't say they actually happen. But then you get to Jesus to say it really did. But then after Jesus comes, well, let's find a way to say that didn't happen either, or that copied us, Christians, which is the true thing, and that's the fake stuff. I mean, like, where do we draw the line? And I'm trying to get there.
I had when I had Michael Jones on, and he's been on twice now, and the second time we discussed the problem of evil, and it was fantastic. I introduced him by saying, I love Michael not because I think he's right, but because I think he's the least wrong in the group of like apologetics. Like I don't know any apologist who I think is more wrong, less wrong. I think he's the least wrong. Like,
I think
and
he's
it was
definitely
a friendly banter because like I consider him a friend, and
Yeah.
we talk all the time, but yeah, like he's definitely he's more honest than the average like apologist, especially like the Ken Hams and the
he's playing with the same toys that the serious academics I have on my channel, like Dr. Josh and stuff, are doing. I just think sometimes he's trying to find the most scholarly on the position of the Christian worldview, and then like going there. Like, let's find Michael Heiser. What's Michael Heiser say? Let's go with him. John Walton. Let's find what John Walton says and let's go with him. He's still a Christian, so somehow can I get as scholarly as possible and still remain in this bubble of my particular position? And so, and that's fine. I commend him for that, you know?
Yeah, I actually, and that's what I tell people is I say to people, not to make this an inspiring philosophy moment like hour, but I always tell people like my understanding of what Michael does is he goes like, okay, like I have this faith, I want to try and fit it into like the scholarly resources, where a lot of apologists do this tap dance of like, no, I'm a Christian because all the evidence. It's like, no, you're not. You didn't start. You didn't sit down and analyze the evidence of like every religion and go, well, Christianity has them. You had like emotional reasons for why you were a Christian, and then you're like, oh no, this doesn't work with evolution. This doesn't work with all these other things. Let me find reasons to like make my brain okay with all that stuff. Like, no one arrives at Christianity because of apologetics.
I've never met a Christian apologist, going with what you just said, who before they were ever a Christian or an apologist went and examined all of these cases of dying and ascending and rising and miracle workers and stuff like that, comparative mythology and things, and then arrived and went, after examining all of these things, I think the most plausible and the realistic one is this one here. Never. I've always found that a Christian apologist, once they have been seeded into the faith, they then are going out of their way to find evidence or try to make their view right. And they're willing to go, oh, I can read Romulus. I can read about this. I can read about that. And somehow factor that in so that my worldview is still right. You see what I'm saying?
It's like post hoc instead of like following the evidence where it leads. Yeah.
Right.
This actually leads us into something I do want to talk about, but man, we are like, it's very easy to talk to you, and we've been chatting for over an hour now, but this
it's your fault,
next year for it's really, really enjoyable. But so have you would obviously know about Sathya Sai Baba, right?
I haven't really studied. I mean, I know of him, but I haven't really studied him.
Absolutely, definitely a con man. Like he does like sleight of hand tricks, and people are like, oh, he's spawning gold in his hand, like gold necklaces, and he's like doing like stuff and then giving necklaces to ladies and stuff.
Right.
But when he died, I think there was like people went into his compound, they found like hundreds of like gold watches, like with like from boxes and stuff. But there are a lot of people who say he did like legitimate miracles, and he had like, there are testimonies that you can read online of him raising people from the dead 3 years after the body is smelling. Like I was going to read out. Sorry, 3 days. 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. My gosh. 3 days. I always misspeak. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
So I was going to read out the part of the story, but for the sake of time, essentially someone called Radha Krishna died, and they were there for like 3 days, and they were saying, let's bring him. First of all, Sathya Sai Baba was an Indian guru, and this was in the 50s, so 1956. And I'll just read the last part. Gently, Baba asked the tearful women and the sorrowful son-in-law to leave the room. So this is a testimony that's written online. As they left, he closed the door behind them. They did not know, no one knew what happened in the room where there was only the Baba and the dead man. So this dead man had been dead for 3 days. After a few minutes, Baba opened the door and beckoned the waiting ones in. There on the bed, Radhakrishna, I'm a bit dyslexic, was looking at them and smiling. Amazingly, the stiffness of his death had vanished and his natural color was returning. Baba went out, stroked the patient's head, and said to him, "Talk to them. They're worried." Why worried? Asked. Oh, sorry. Worried and perplexed, Radhakrishna said, "Why are you worried? I'm right here." Swami turned to his wife. "I've given you your husband back," he said. "Now go get him a hot drink." So that's like a testimony in the 50s.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of people who follow, like 500,000 people went to his burial, and Sai Baba predicted his death. So this is where it gets interesting. This is where I feel like there's some analogies, right?
Mhm.
So you have 500,000 people who went to his burial, a lot of them believing these stories of resurrection. And this wasn't the only resurrection account that he had, by the way. But and like I said, I think he's a con, like at least a little bit.
Right.
But still, there's people who believe this. 500,000 people attended his burial. Sai Baba had predicted that he would die at the age of 96 and would remain healthy until then. But after he died, but he died at the age of 84. But after he died, some devotees, and see if you can see a parallel here, suggested that he was referring to many to different lunar years,
Yeah.
as counted by Telugu-speaking Hindus, rather than solar years, and using Indian way of accounting for age, which counts for years to come as part of a person's life. Other devotees have spoken of the anticipated resurrection, reincarnation, or awakening. So they're reinterpreting the ideas of like, well, and you can see this happen with one of my favorite subjects, and Inspiring Philosophy is doing a video on this, is why hasn't Jesus returned yet? Because he's told his disciples, I'm coming back. People standing here will not taste death until you see the Son of Man returning. So
Right. And he's going to do a video. Inspiring Philosophy is going to do a video where he's arguing that it didn't fail. I'm like so curious, or that Jesus didn't really predict that it was going to happen immediately. And he said Del C. Allison Jr. May have also switched his position on this. I don't know, because I'm in direct contact with Del, and Del's written many books where Jesus failed. And I mean, I've got him on my back shelf here. So I'm curious to know.
What do you mean?
Failed. He's a failed apocalyptic prophet.
Yeah.
Like, he made predictions that didn't happen. It's interesting what you just said. I definitely see a pattern in Jewish thought, Hebrew Bible. I mean, like reinterpreting with Daniel, the calculating the 490 years, all that. I see it with Christianity right out the gate, already trying to understand, like, what's this mean? And then 2 Peter 3, trying to change time. 1,000 years is like a day. So maybe we don't really know what the hell this means. And therefore, it didn't fail because Jesus can't be wrong, so.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And to me, so for me personally, I think that what happens is people have experiences. I don't know what these experiences are. And people have like teachers, profound teachers, philosophers, religious leaders who they respect a lot, and they go through some wild stuff. And then they have these like the early church sold all their belongings, right? Like, they really believe what they were believing. So it's like, you can see after 30 lifetimes, 30, 40, 50, 60 years after the fact, people are writing these stories and trying to make sense of this movement. And you can so see how an empty tomb in Mark turns into, oh, well, actually Jesus came back, and then the body's raised from the dead, and and there was zombies walking all through Jerusalem. And I know Mike Lacona, who's a Christian, said that didn't happen, and he lost his job because of that. So interesting. And but the thing with the Jesus returning thing is, and this is what I said to Michael, and like I said, we're friends. I said to him on Twitter, I said, you better make it good or I'm coming for you. And he said, what if it makes you cry? And I was like, I said, #saved. But the thing is, like, if Jesus says a few things, he says, "Surely I tell you the truth, this generation will by no means pass until all these things take place. The Son of Man returning on the clouds." Another part, it says, "The Son of Man will come in great glory with his Father and his angels. Assuredly, I say that people standing here shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." And like, I've heard Christians like interpret this to be like, well, there was a second death in heaven, like a spiritual death, and there's all these like post hoc rationalizations, or my favorite. This was always my favorite. You know what, Derek? We can ask him when we meet him.
Yeah. I mean, you're You're hitting the nail on the head. I have nothing else to add to what you're saying on this because it's the most obvious to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we've done we've pretty much done just the quick positions, which was supposed to be like 5 minutes, and we're almost at the end of the podcast. So I think what we'll do is let's move into some Q&A, and I'll just throw some of these like other ideas I have, because this has been a really enjoyable conversation. And thank you everyone for coming out to the last episode of Deep Drinks for 2022. This has been an exciting year. And next year is going to be even better. We're going to have some cool things happening soon. And obviously, you can see down here, once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're doing a charity stream, because it means I can monetize the channel. Thanks, Derek. It means we can monetize the channel, which means that, you know, like I can get better guests on, and I can do some stuff. And you know, like we're currently spending a lot of money on, like, you should see our booze cabinet, because each guest wants a different bottle of alcohol, and it's just like this huge thing. And the other day I was making like cocktails by myself, and I sent a photo to Thomas Holy Kool-Aid Westbrook, and he said, oh, because I made his drink, which is essentially Long Island iced tea, did not recover good. Anyway, everyone subscribe if you like this content, but more importantly than subscribing to Deep Drinks, make sure you go subscribe to Myth Vision Podcast. This, like us guys, this is not like, it's like video after video after video after video of like these big questions, and like really into the weeds. Like some of the stuff that you talk about is just like I've scrolled down like 20 videos, and we're only like a month ago. Like, you put out how many videos a week do you put out? Like,
I mean, I pretty much post almost every day.
It's crazy. And these are like some of them are like 20-minute videos, some of them are like 2-hour videos. It's really cool. And of course, also make sure you if you like what Derek's doing, you got a Patreon, and people can go get like direct questions from you. They can talk directly to you, and they can get a bunch of different perks, and also ask questions to these scholars on your Patreon.
Thank you, brother.
Which
Appreciate
is awesome. And you also have your courses coming up.
Yeah.
MVP courses. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wanted to take the academics that I interview all the time, have them systematically teach whatever they specialize in, a particular course. And like you were taking a college course at Yale or Harvard or Oxford or whatever it might be, Princeton, a lot of these scholars actually taught or are still teaching at some of these colleges. And it'll be an online course where anyone from the convenience of their home for an affordable rate can literally take the course, and they have the course for a lifetime. So they can have their whole families come over, or friends, whoever's into this stuff, and be able to like watch it and whatnot and learn. Because I want to take this stuff that's in the ivory towers of academia, and not just in books. So many scholars publish, try to make more popular books and stuff, but we're going toward MP4 as well. So it's not like this is just an online college class where you might hear a lecture. These are high quality edited 4K videos where we're giving you like what you would get if you went to one of these massive, great colleges for a good price. And right now I've already done recordings with M. David Litwa, Richard Carrier. I've done James Tabor and Del C. Allison Jr., which I've mentioned earlier about the apocalyptic Jesus. He does one on the quest for the historical Jesus. I've got this January coming up. Dennis McDonald's coming up. Kip Davis is coming up to stay here to record. I mean, everyone's coming here and they stay here and we record and do the courses. And I'm planning on doing this with many, many academics. It helps the scholars, especially making an income, doing this, and it'll be residual. So anytime anyone ever purchases the course, you're helping that scholar. They get a commission for every sell, but also it's affordable, right? So, and it's really a lot of work goes into making each course with the editing and stuff. So that's stuff we're doing. Yeah.
And for my Christian friends, like when I was a Christian, I would be terrified to watch a channel like yours, because you're not a Christian, right? And so like I would think that you'll probably, I don't know, have some demons or something, or whatever. But what I love about your channel, and what I try and do with this channel, like I bring Christians on, I bring people of all different religions, belief systems on, and I try to have good conversations. Sometimes there are episodes where I'm like making fun of Christianity, or not for Christianity, but like the Bible or certain things, right? Like if I find it immoral. But in general, I try to make this an open, inclusive inclusive for everyone, right?
Right.
and that's what I love about your content is you do the same thing, but more an academic standpoint. My channel is a little different, and I try to have like just deep conversations about things that aren't like not academic. Like I don't have as many scholars and stuff on. That's why you come on. You come on to teach us the academics and everything that you know. But what I love about yours is it's not, you're not like preaching a certain narrative. You'll poke questions at the guests and ask them what they think about certain big topics. So that's what I really appreciate about it.
I try to be kind of a
huge
journalist,
fan.
to not get too much in the way, of the conclusions, but I openly tell people my bias. So it is what it is.
Yeah. And that's good. So guys, if you got any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. I'll try and go through and ask some of the questions that I've missed. But I've got a few questions I want to ask first. And some of these, maybe you can just give me like give me sentence responses to these.
Got it.
Because
Yep.
these are, if people want to hear more about these are literally answered in some of your most recent videos. So
Okay.
Are there other virgin births besides Jesus?
Yes. And I know Bart Ehrman disagrees, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I take his student. His student proves otherwise, but go ahead.
Okay. All right. God had a wife? Question mark.
Well, come on, man. You already know the answer to that one, right? I mean, Asherah.
She's I love Francesca Stefanopoulou. Like I loved her before that book came out. I was watching interviews and like, yeah, she's sassy. That's what I love about her. And she knows her shit. She's an expert. What are any books that you think should be? Are there any books that you think should be in the canon that aren't? And are there any books that you think shouldn't be in the canon? And when I say canon, for those who don't know, it's like when the Bible was canonized 300 years after the writings.
No, I mean maybe. Well, I think the canon isn't big enough. Sure, they should include all of this literature. I mean, because what the problem with having a canon, and I'll shut up, like you wanted short, succinct, is that Christians don't read wide enough. And they don't get the implications, I think, often. And I'm not speaking for every Christian. There are some that are more liberal and progressive in their approach, but it's like, read wider. Like, I don't think we should shrink. I think we should take all of the literature and understand, what is this? What is the phenomena here? Not systematically harmonized, though. So Ascension of Isaiah or looking at Enoch, one Enoch, things, lots of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah. So great answer. I want to quickly swing back to, there was a topic I want to talk about, miracles. So when I was a Christian, I believed in miracles. I believe that I would tell people I saw miracles, but when I think back to it now, I'm like, was that really a miracle? So what I did is I tweeted out to my 450 Twitter followers, and I said, serious question for #Christians. What is the greatest miracle or act of God that you have personally witnessed? And I'll be discussing miracles with Derek tomorrow. And I added inspiring philosophy, capturing Christianity, apologetics 3 and 5, and a few other apologists. And I got no reply from anyone.
None?
Right?
Not a single reply. Anybody at all?
No one.
Not even a response at all.
Not even a response. But not only that, I then went on Instagram and Facebook, which has a lot of my old church friends who, swear by this stuff. And I asked, and I posted it, and 100 people saw it, and no one went to the anonymous miracle form to just tell me their testimony. It's literally, I was just opening the floor for us to talk. So, well, actually, this is what we got. I uploaded a Cricket's audio file, but we literally got nothing. And I was actually shocked by that. I was like, wow, like this is a chance for Christians, like my Christian friends and stuff, to say, like, this is, like, this happened to me. This is a miracle happening. I know this was an act of God. Like, and I'm sure I've heard stories of like people, and I was looking, videos of people getting out of wheelchairs and stuff. It is a rather Christian, like faith healing seem to be a Christian centric thing. Like a lot of other religions don't necessarily have physical healings like faith healers, but I want to get your perspective. What do you think about faith healing?
Well, I think it's a psychological thing, mostly placebo and the environment. And I don't think that they're literally doing any miracles. I don't believe
Mm.
that and if you go into look into the miracle accounts, and I know people who believe miracles, modern miracles are happening and stuff, and they try to find cases where this is like the case. And like, once again, did I teleport to your couch, or like did it happen somehow? And honestly, we aren't sure, but you're drawing your conclusion. There
Mm.
are miracle claims all across the world, not just Christianity. There are miracles that are healing, things
Mm.
like that. And in fact, before Christianity, Asclepius, there were temples all over the
Okay.
Mediterranean world. He was a healing god. He supposedly resurrected from the someone from the dead. Zeus got mad and killed him. His father Apollo got angry at Zeus. Zeus resurrected Asclepius back from the dead, and then of course had him become a god up there on Mount Olympus. I'm making the point that like Asclepius is the original OG when it comes to like being in the Mediterranean and doing healings like that. You could argue that healings happened earlier through these prophets like Elijah and Elisha. There were miracles, or possibly looking at other figures. But if you're like going to try and look at some contemporaries competition, Asclepius would have been the competition in the city, in
Interesting.
the world.
I'll have to do some reading on
Oh
Asclepius.
yeah, we still use the symbol, the serpent symbol as our medicine. Our medical ambulances have the serpent.
Oh,
This is still something that goes back, rooted into medicine, and of course, Asclepius,
wow.
plays into some of this stuff. But you see serpents all throughout the ancient world. They have kind of a
Mm.
divine essence, and they're mysterious and stuff, and they shed their skin, which looks like they're immortal because they regenerate. It looks like they're brand new once they shed their skin. They're like reborn, and that's why you think
Wow.
mythologies like the Mesopotamian mythologies have snakes stealing the plant that gives
Mm.
Gilgamesh eternal life, or the plant that gives Adam and Eve everlasting life and stuff, or that stealing the plant in some way it's a different narrative, but it plays a role in like taking their immortality away, and they end up
Mm.
being mortal and dying. So there's all sorts of stuff to look into, man. But
I when it comes to miracles, I really love what Hume says. David Hume, Daddy Hume. He says, and I'll say this slowly because it is a mouthful. No testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle, unless that testimony be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish.
mm,
We must always decide to favor the lesser miracle. Always accept the lesser miracle. And I love it. It's like what's more miraculous, that you flew to Australia, got on my couch, or that you teleported.
right.
So it's like,
And if I told you, I'm going to teleport to your couch,
mm,
and then
mm,
you actually believe that I teleported because I'm on your couch tomorrow, 24 hours later,
mm,
no, you might be a little bit shocked. But what if you
mm,
found out, hold on, there were flights that did take place here, whatever. If you examine it, and we know so many other people take flights in the world to get to places in short periods of time. This is that prior probability stuff that like
mm,
I'm not going to get a calculator out, and I'm not going to pretend that I have a way of factoring in the proper numbers. Just from basic experience, when I talk about prior probability, people fly places and get there in convenient amount of time. And so it's like, which one are you going to go with? It's the
mm.
simplest thing is, and then if you see other figures who die or who supposedly walk on water, like Buddha walks on water, various figures, this one's the one.
Mm.
Hmm. Dude, there's
There's
something
also,
else.
yeah, and it's like when you go to kind of like, I love what Christopher Hitchens says in God Is Not Great. He says like, if Jesus can heal a blind man, why not heal blindness?
Mhm. Why
Question
not
it.
cure it? Why not cure it? Yeah.
Yeah, just cure blindness altogether. Just remove blindness from,
I can
like,
heal
if you,
cancer, but I don't cure it.
yeah, yeah, it seems malicious. Or like he says, like, what's so good about like driving out demons to send them into a flock of pigs so they jump off a cliff? I mean, send them into some flowers or something that doesn't have pain receptors or something. You know what I mean? Like, don't throw it into like an animal that's sentient. I don't know. So, but yeah, yeah, it to me, and I'm sure you've heard of Carl Sagan's The Dragon in the Garage analogy, right? Have you heard that?
Yes, yes. Every
Yeah.
time God becomes unfalsifiable,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, if I say to Derek, I've got a dragon in my garage, and he's like, "Wow, let's go check it out." And we go in there, and there's no dragon. And I say, "Oh, it's actually invisible." And then he goes, "Oh, I'll put flour on the floor so we can see the footprints." "Oh, it actually can't move flour." "Oh, okay. Well, I'll use heat detection." "Actually, it's a perfectly temperature." Eventually, like, if you keep looking for this god and like this god or this dragon, and you can't, and it literally avoids every form of detection.
Mhm.
Eventually, that dragon or god becomes exactly the same. A universe with that dragon or that god looks exactly the same as the evidence for a god. Oh my gosh, looks exactly the same as a universe with or without that god, right?
Right.
So, like,
right.
yeah. So let's answer some final questions from people. I have a great question about Islam and the Holy Spirit. Jews and Christians say the Holy Spirit is part of God, and I think mainstream Muslims say the Holy Spirit is Gabriel. Is this a mistake or difference? And what did the old Muslims think about it?
I have not investigated that. I
Okay.
honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look it up. I don't know that Muslims equate Gabriel, the angel, with the Holy Spirit. But then again, maybe they do. Maybe this is just a different tradition that people have been building off of and came up with something different. I don't know that. I've never looked at it and seen that. So,
Okay, awesome. James Epperson coming in with hot questions again. Are you a Santa mythicist or a Santa historist?
well, when Saint Nick, right, was a guy, but is Santa? Obviously, I don't think Santa existed. So the question is, did they mythologize this guy and create what we have today? And so
Yeah.
I and is everything that we're hearing today actually stemmed from the guy? This is another kind of like the complexity of Jesus. Like, is everything that's mythologized something that really stems from the guy? No. Like, they are borrowing stuff. Or at least when I use the word borrow, people go with plagiarism or this and that. There's no copyright on this material. This is just in the world that they live in. If someone makes a hip hop song right now, would you say he's copying Tupac or he's copying Biggie or he's copying Eminem?
Yes.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Everyone copies Biggie and Tupac now.
But yeah, and it gets pretty detailed. Like, you can get lost in the weeds.
Okay, awesome. That's a great question. Great answer. Sorry. So in the last 12 months, what, if anything, have you changed your mind on?
Last 12 months. Well,
Because I'm imagining that I'll ask this again. So this will be like, have you seen those like Billie Eilish like 1 year interviews that happen like every year?
Mhm.
I'll ask this every year. So for the next 12 years, that when you keep coming on the show, on the Derek Knows Everything Christmas special, we'll ask the same question and we'll see how your beliefs change.
Well, I think there's a couple of things I could say. Obviously, the mythicist thing, where I've become convinced that historicism makes more sense. The other thing is, I think, and it's not necessarily that my mind has completely changed. It's just my focus has been more in this area of seeing how I can have common ground as much as I can with people who are of faith, and trying to understand the physical science behind why people believe, the brain, things like that. I'm trying to bridge a gap there where it's not like they're believers and I'm non-believers. Like, we're both experiencing this world we live in. We call it life. And instead of doing tribalism all over again, like the early church did to each other, or every group says, you're not like me and I'm not, you're demonic and I'm not, we have the right thing. I'm trying to find common ground with people who are believers. It's just tough when you're dealing with fundamentalism, which is what my real motivation is, to try and get people to be non-fundamentalist. I'm sure there's many other things that I've like started to do. And in fact, I would say also my views as far as just becoming more a people person, more liberal in my approach, how to view how women have been treated and things after reading the history, the way that the language in the ancient world, the patriarchal language that is built into these structures, I've really started realizing, oh my goodness, like even the crucifixion, we've been talking about this whole episode. I've asked Celine Lilly and other academics who've come on, and these are feminist scholars who who see and are sensitive to the language, they understand that Rome was known as the impenetrable. Why do you think they penetrated when they crucified? They were the ones who penetrated. They were not the ones being penetrated. So it like sex is built into warfare, into everything in the ancient.
Wow.
When you think about it, the reason they're crucifying is they're penetrating the people opposing Rome. And if you look at the iconography on some of the statues they've had, Rome is always a man. And it's like there were 30 templates in Ephesus, in one of the temples that were in the first century around the time Domitian was emperor. And there were women in every one of them. And the women represented the nations that Rome conquered. And in one of them, they'll have a knife to the woman's throat. It's a rape scene. And it was actually encouraged.
Wow.
Because Rome was dominating and penetrating nations. So when you start to see this, you start to realize it affects you politically. It affects you and how you're going to be sensitive to people today and giving voices to voices that weren't given those voices, unless you were the queen or the like super high up someone of power, an elitist. You're not going to get heard if you're female. And so I'm realizing
I do appreciate. I did actually notice how many, because I wrote down like a bunch of like people I recognize from your channel when I read out that list. But I love the diversity that you have. I mean, like you don't. It's not just a bunch of like dudes. You know what I mean? Like it's like you got like I love like I think I fell in love with Elaine Pagel when she first came on. I was like, she's so lovely, and she has such a good story. Oh,
and another thing I would say that drives into the female thing, it also drives into race, right? The whole idea of blacks and whites and stuff, and seeing that in academia. Like I'm trying to give more voices to people who aren't white guys like me, females, obviously I'm trying to find people who are not like me. And in fact, I'm interviewing another Jew soon. So I'm trying to be diverse in the approach.
They won't be voting for Kanye, but that's for sure.
No, I don't think so.
Sorry to bring it back to that. I shouldn't talk about Kanye. He doesn't need any more attention. Someone asked this in the Discord, and there is a link to the Discord if anyone wants to join. We have great conversations over there. What limit do you have for those with ignorant beliefs? Do you have like a cutoff?
I'm sure I do.
But like academically, like let's say you had, I mean, you're not really in the political space, but like, let's say someone wanted to come on and talk about like race realism or something.
I mean, I don't want to get into like as much as I can. I try to keep it within the topics I specifically discuss for Myth Vision. I mean, it is an academic thing. That doesn't mean I silence my scholars who might jab their views from time to time in here. But like race realism, that's something completely different. I thought you were talking
but
about
I was just trying to think of race realism is dumb, but I just thinking of like something disgusting. But like let's say there was like the race realism equivalent of like a historian who came on and thought like, I don't know, like he was making an argument that I don't know, that certain ethnic groups were dirty or disgusting. Like
okay, so this is something that I've never told anyone. I've interviewed people, didn't go live because I already was wondering, especially after my learning experience from past academics that I've had on my channel, right? You kind of learn that I've never published. I've purposely avoided publishing because they said things, and I wasn't just going to edit out those things they say that I found like really, and they weren't really PhDs. Some of them were really just popular authors in other countries, and I just didn't publish them. I'm not going to name names, but I'm just not. They're just never showing up on my channel. I've even had to take down videos, and I'm not talking about Robert Price. That's a whole different thing. I've taken down videos because I've put disclaimers up before, and the guy was so upset at my disclaimer and saying I don't agree with many things that this guy specifically espouses. He was so upset. He's like, just take it down then. You don't have to tell me twice.
That's the thing. And just for everyone who's interested, you can go to deepdrinks.com/disclaimer. And because and this is Derek, I'm a small YouTube channel, but Derek spent hours on the phone to me talking about this stuff, because there was a big question of like, how do you do you choose to platforms bad ideas? So for me, Deep Drinks isn't a safe space. Like to me, Deep Drinks is like we explore ideas and I try and label the idea, the concepts, the episodes, so people can skip ones they don't want to. Like if you've got like religious trauma syndrome, you probably don't want to watch an episode with the Christian apologist.
Right.
So or like purity culture or something, right? So I try and be as open as I can to talk about most ideas, and try and platform them responsibly. Not that I've had anyone crazy on, but like we are doing some, like in the new year, Nuria Khan, who I know you've had on the channel, Holy Humanist, she's amazing. We're going to be running, potentially running a panel on Iran, right, which is talking about human rights violations and stuff. And I don't want to just be shitting on Islam or anything like that in the panel, but obviously like that could be quite offensive to some Muslims because we'll be talking about the religious laws in Iran that essentially come from the Quran. So there's a fine line of like, how do you have these tough conversations without being Kanye, without being a dickhead.
Kanye, that I don't think you can compare. I mean, it's
sorry, I keep bringing it up.
Yeah, no. But being critical is a whole different thing. But I'm like that too. So
I just opened up my Bible and I found this that I put up here.
I can't see it.
Let me just. It's probably gonna focus.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Unhappy plus Jesus equals happy to the power of eternity. I wrote that in Bible college. Anyway, last question. Absolutely last question, and then we're going to go. And this is a question I didn't get to ask you last time, but I ask everyone this question now. I try to. What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
I'd want, and now I'm going to sound like Jordan Peterson for a second here.
And it'd take me 3 days to answer that question.
The question, like, I want to be on the same page. When you say true, like, what does this mean? Historically true, or like because they're all every one of them, from what I understand, have legend. They're all like using narratives to formulate their particular traditions.
I guess if you like had to if let's say you had like this magic box and this magic box said one of the world's religions is actually accurate, is true, and you've got to guess which one because it's important. Which one would you choose?
Oh
like,
man,
which one,
dude,
which one like aligns with reality the best?
Honestly, I couldn't. I don't know if I could answer that question and be like honest, but I guess I'd go back and go with something like that's animism or some form of pantheism or something like that before I would get lost into this particular God and this guy, because what ends up evolving philosophically speaking, it's like kind of science in a way. Philosophy keeps advancing to the concepts of God. God gets pushed to outside space and time when there used to be layers in heaven. Now it's like outside of the existence of this universe is where God dwells, because it's like the dragon in the garage. So you kind of wonder, like, and I've said this, I'm just going to say it like this because I can't say any specific, right? Is nature the divine?
Let me just preface this, right? So like, you don't believe in the Bible, right? So you probably don't believe in the Book of Mormon because that's like a third book on top of that,
right?
So it's like Mormonism is probably a little more silly than Christianity in your mind. If you don't accept the Bible, you don't accept the third book as well. So it's like, are you thinking like maybe you go back to like clay tablets and like clay statues? And
I don't even know about, I mean, all of them seem human. And so it's more about, I guess if you were to put me into what I think makes the most sense, the thing I today would wrestle with is ultimately, is nature and existence itself something, I can't put my finger on it, beyond just naturalism? So like, is existence something I'm just not aware what it is? It doesn't seem to be a being or a personal entity or something like that. But this weird thing that we call life, that we exist in, is that something other than naturalism? That meaning it's all natural, it's laws of nature, and that's it? Or is there something to it beyond that? I don't know. That is about as honest of truth that I could get at in terms of what makes the most sense to me. As far as a being, I understand people want to project their consciousness onto something else higher up. They want to say there's a mind because we have minds. But this is also why drawing that particular argument could say, well, God has a dick because I have a dick. God likes to have sex because I like to have sex. Like, why not continue? Because that's exactly what the ancient text of the Bible says. God is just a reflection of us.
I knew you were referencing Francesca.
This is, but that's where I'm at. Like, bro, like we're animals. We are.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. This is a hard question you ask me because I don't think there's any world religion. There are certain philosophies though about like Buddhism and meditation and stuff that I like. There's philosophies of stoicism that I like. There's things that I like. That's why I asked if you mean true, as in like there's something that rings a bell to me, something that I think would be good practice as a human, as an animal, right? In this world that I live in. Sure. But as this one's the truth, bro, don't put me in that category because I'm just like,
this is why it's a great question because and it's interesting to hear different people's perspective. I'm not sure. I think Michael Jones chose like an Eastern religion, which is really interesting. But you can go back and you can listen to like, you got atheists, you got agnostics, you got Christians, you got different. It's a question you can ask almost any religion because it makes them analyze beliefs critically, and it's an interesting question because it gets you to process the idea of faith differently. But I like what you said there about like maybe there's more to naturalism, and I think and this actually ties in really well. You would probably get a lot out of the Shinto episode, which is the first episode of 2023. I just need to plug this quickly.
Yeah.
Caitlin is like, she helped a whole series. She was a co-writer for the whole series on Religion for Breakfast. I think it's Religion for Breakfast. Oh no, I should have double checked. She's like a PhD candidate. She has written in this book, the Bloomberg Handbook to Japanese Religions. I have a hard copy coming. Wow. And Shinto is really interesting because like it's seen throughout like anime, seen throughout it's like Japanese homegrown religion. There's like a bunch of gods of like rice, right? Like everything has like a life force. There's like a life force in everything. Yeah. And I want to learn more about it. It's gonna be a really cool episode. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe so you can watch that and ask questions. And
Jojo Freelancer in the chat says maybe Judaism that includes New Testament and the Quran. You can go ahead and check off the box Abrahamic faiths to me. Like you can just check those and put those as in they are not the truest. That's where I'm at. Yeah. So this is just no. I mean, I understand people want to project their things, but like it to me, every step of the way in it is man. It's human. Yeah. It's all human. So, and I think the same even of the Eastern philosophies too. Like what we're, so anyway, I can go on and on about this.
And and I love that you are going on and on about it. I hope you're okay with just going over a couple of minutes. We are wrapping up though. And one thing I do want to say as well is I did mention that no one rose to the challenge to tell me a miracle they've experienced. It was a diss. It was a diss. I was dissing. But that I understand why people might not want to have done that because they might have thought that I was like pulling it apart. However, if you have had an experience, something that I'm doing, I'm playing with the idea of is doing deep drinks, quick sips. So I'll do like a 10-minute interview with an interesting idea concept. And if you like that kind of stuff, you can post your miracle into the form, which is here. You can get access to my Twitter, and you just tell us about like what like a story that you've had, and I might interview about it and put you on the channel. The other thing I just want to mention before we wrap up is next year, my wife and I are having our first kid through IVF. Wow. So it might be a little bit around January 20 time. It might be a little bit chaotic. So I hope you bear with me. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming out, subscribing, and supporting myself and Derek. Make sure you go over and support Derek on Myth Vision. And Derek, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that you want to say before we leave?
Keep going. break through the barrier of you're right, even now that I think that these religions are false or not literally true. I find truth, this is why I mentioned, in many stories. I find truth when I
Mm,
watch Iron Man. I watch truth in DC
mm,
Comics. I find truth in real historical events. I find truth in myth, in legend, in and I think to paint the ancients as idiots is wrong. I think what we should do is understand that they were in their own space time, and this is what their world looked like to them. That doesn't
mm.
mean I'm saying they're morally right. And even in their own space, they might have been morally in the wrong. There's stuff we
Mm.
can learn, is what I'm saying. And I think
Oh,
yeah, what?
sorry. And I keep saying we're going to wrap this up, but this is so interesting. You know how like a lot of Christians will say, slavery God was just working inside the paradigm of the time.
Mhm.
Zoroastrianism forbid slavery, and they
Really?
were around the same. Yeah,
I didn't
I
know
mean,
that.
I got to fact check this. I saw this on like, and this was an actual. It was one of Hank Green. I think it was.
I'm
It was
really suspect of that. Not gonna
okay.
lie. I'm very suspect. I would speak to someone who knows the history of
It was
the
it was
Persian
on
Empire and stuff.
Crash Course. It was Crash Course History that I was watching. So I
Yeah,
mean, that's
I
a
need to
pretty
check that out. I'm
yeah.
kind of suspect that they didn't have slavery at all. Most empires literally survived off of
Yeah, well, that's why
that
they
system.
mentioned it. Is that
Hmm,
they mentioned it
okay,
because it was like they were outside. But if that's true, that's big. That's like
right.
huge, right?
Yeah, that would be
That
big.
demolishes that argument. But anyway, keep wrapping up. Sorry, I got
Yeah,
distracted.
no, just I find too often, I'm going to speak to the skeptics out there. I find too often that you could tell people are hurt by the
Mm,
religion to the point where they just want it to be false rather than
yeah,
like trying to get the therapy they need, the time that they need so they can actually enjoy this stuff for what it is, because it's not
yeah.
what I'm saying. Christians have monopolized New Testament canon.
Mm,
Jewish people have monopolized Hebrew Bible. I'm
mm,
saying go and read this stuff as ancient Near Eastern literature. Go and read this stuff as legends in the first century
mm,
and investigate it like you'd read Suetonius, like you'd read the Greek mythologies. Read this in the genre that it is and stuff. Have fun with it, because once you see all that other stuff, it really rips the fear of like, oh, is this true? Like, and am I going to go to hell if I
yeah,
don't accept it? You're like, read it
yeah.
far and wide. Keep reading. I love this stuff, and I want to get people who are atheists, skeptics, agnostics, theists that are more liberal. Man, I have people who support me who are Christians, but they're not fundamentalists. And they're
Yeah, yeah,
like,
of course. Same.
we love what you're doing. Yeah. So,
One of my Discord mods is a Christian. One of the two Discord mods I have is a Christian. Yeah,
wow.
it's
That's awesome.
it
Yeah. I mean, and I
mm,
want to show that more, right? Like, we're not a
mm.
community of atheists. We're not a community of you must be like us and think
Yeah,
exactly like us.
exactly. The exploration of ideas is important.
Hmm.
Um, well, thank you so much for coming out. I thank
Yeah.
you, Tima, and everyone else for saying congratulations. And I've been watching your questions, everyone. It's been really awesome to see your questions come in and your support. I really appreciate it. Make sure you go check out Derek's channel. And guys, we'll see you in 2023. It's going to be an exciting year. We have some big things coming, both on my channel and on Derek's channel. So make sure you go subscribe. See you
Thank you.
guys. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
We
We
are
are Myth Vision.
Myth Vision.